But I'm glad you guys are here. We are starting a new series tonight. Last week, we ended off with a series on how to survive a zombie apocalypse. We're going to revisit some of those things throughout the year. One thing I want to have happen for us, and this is really important, really important that you get this, is that we never just want to be done with a series and move on. The whole reason that we do these things and we talk about these things is to make some of the bigger truths of God a little bit more accessible for us. We can apply it to our lives. What we want these years to be are building blocks that we can spend all eternity with, that actually affect the way we live here, the way we live at our schools, but then the way we live as husbands and wives, as mothers and fathers, as sisters and brothers. I was on a roll. I wanted to keep it going, but I couldn't. As neighbors and laborers. Anyways, man, this might be doing this all night, so I might have to switch. But what we want to have happen here is what you guys learn and hear isn't just like an exercise of the mind, or that you're just getting some interesting thoughts about how to live your life or cope with stress or cope with life or whatever, but that you're getting building blocks to live your life forever. Because the reality is you're not going to be in the revolution forever. As much as that makes me really sad, if we had like a 90-year-old high school student, I'd feel really bad for them if they were still in this room. But the reality is you're going to graduate, you're going to move on, and that's awesome. But what we want you to take with you is your life and your walk with God, because that lasts forever, and that affects every aspect of your life. So we finished the series there, and we're moving into a new series, and the whole purpose of this series is just to get you to know God a little bit better, to make God a less of an image and more of a reality. When you think of God, and you guys can just shout it out for me, but when you think of God, and we talked about this last year a little bit, but when you think of God, what images come to your mind or often come to people's mind? Like, what are some stereotypes that come up when you hear the word God? Vending machine, that's a good one. So like, hey, I need this prayer, like totally like get me out of the, hey, and put in your quarter. It's like I gave my time, I served, whatever it was, and I get what I want. So God is something to get something from. Good. What are some other ones? A genie, yes. I just make a wish. So this is why it never worked. I'm supposed to rub a lamp, not my hands. This has been earth. I'll be back. Sorry. Yeah, so like a genie. So what are some other ones that come to mind? What? Big beard, right? Why is he's like old and this like distant, like loving grandfather that talks like Charlton Heston. And anyone know who Charlton Heston is in here? All right, so just moving on. I don't really know who he is. That's before my time a little bit. But anyways, yeah. So you get this deep voiced old man. Simpsons always portrays this God. You can't see his face, but you just see his dragging beard and his sandals. Sandals is another one that comes up a lot, because he's like from Bible times. Of course, and I always thought that was interesting, because of course God never got with the times. Like Jesus was always stuck back then, so we always think of God like wearing sandals and a robe. We're not doing that now, so if God were to come here today, I think he's with the times. That's all I'm saying. Okay, so what are some other images that come up? Anyone else? Yeah. Oh, like the big cloud epiphany, come down and like shake and rattle your world. I am God speaking. Yeah, so you got this like big, distant, booming voice. The reality is that these are all pictures of God. Whether you think of Jesus as like a man walking around in a white robe with a purple beauty sash, in sandals with flowing locks of hair along the beach all the time. We have these different pictures of God, and for whatever picture that we got, whether it was from Sunday school or from things you heard or things that you had thought about God growing up. And maybe you didn't grow up in a church. I didn't grow up in a church, but I had lots of ideas about what God was like. I thought he was a rule maker, like a police officer. He was always ready to judge me when I did something wrong. I felt like I was never going to be able to stand before God and have him ever really love me for who I was. But then it kind of changed a little bit in high school, and I was like, what? God loves everybody, man. He's just going to love me because he understands me. Like I was like this like quasi-philosopher, whatever. That's who I was. Not anymore. Maybe. I don't know. Moving on. But we have these different pictures of God, and for right or for wrong, they're pictures, and a lot of times they force and they change how we relate to God. You are not designed to relate to a picture. If I put up a picture of Taylor Swift, and I was like, here, there's Taylor right there. Isn't she cute? Yeah, she's so nice, and she just shakes it off. She's so good, and she's so talented. And I could tell you that she works with her friend Max, who like produces songs with her. And I could tell you that she's got these other friends. I'm trying to draw a blank on all her trivia right now, but I could talk to you about her reviews, and I could say everything about her, and I could say she's my best friend. Would you guys be so amazed if I told you she's my best friend? How many of you guys would believe me? No one would believe me if you guys said she was my best friend, right? No one, because I'm holding up a picture of her. I might have a lot of information about her, but that doesn't mean I have a relationship with her. And a lot of times we have pictures of God in our minds. And sometimes it can kind of disguise the idea that we have a relationship with God. We can have a lot of ideas and opinions about God, but God isn't concerned with what you think about him. God doesn't care about what you think about him, in a sense that he wants you to know him. He doesn't want you just to think about him. He wants you to know him. And if you just knew a lot of information about God, but you never actually talked to him, what would that make you? It makes you a stalker, right? And think about it, right? So you're on Facebook. You might know a lot of information about Taylor Swift and where she lives and her eating habits and all this kind of stuff. But the more and more I talk about her with this knowledge without actually knowing her, the creepier I sound, right? And the same thing. I mean, think about your walk with your God. I mean, we could know a lot or have a lot of opinions about God, but the more and more we start to build up knowledge base about who God is, but not actually getting to know him, the more we just sound like a stalker of God rather than someone who's walking with him. And so this series is going to be one of those series that I hope that we can dive in. And two things I hope happens. One is that we realize that God is amazing and that we can know him. And as big as he is and as mysterious as he is and as huge and kind of undescribable as he is, that we could still know him. Like, for instance, you know me, you know what I share with you, and we have a relationship, and a lot of us have had some great conversations, and I love that. You don't know everything about me. You don't know everything about my life. You don't know everything about my past. You don't know everything about how I feel or how I think. But you have enough information about me to say you have a relationship with me, right? That you can talk to me, you can relate to me. And the same thing's true of God. While we might not be able to unpack everything that God is, you can still know him. And you can still know bits about who he is, and it can change how you talk to him, how you relate to him, and how you live for him. There's nothing more defeating in your walk with God than trying to just measure up to something that you don't know, or just living for standards that you think you're never going to get by on. One thing we never want to have happen here at the Revolution is for you to feel like your value here to us or any of us is dependent on how often you show up, or how much you can give or put on this display on the stage, or how often you can go and be loving out there. We want you to know that your value is found in your relationship and your connection with the God who made you. And that's what we want to happen in this series. So you guys ready to dive in with me? Yeah, a little bit, maybe so, maybe not. So we're going to do our first series, or this series is called Emo God. I couldn't really think of a better, more like awesome way to introduce this. I was trying to think of some like epic way to say emo God, but I just really couldn't do it. And I don't know, is anyone emo anymore? Is anyone emo? Is that even around? Like, it was around like 3 or 4 years ago, emo was like a style and a fashion, but I think they're all too emotional to keep it going. They're like, I give up, man, it's just too much work, man, I'm just gonna, whatever. And they're just kidding, that was terrible. So if you're emo, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to offend you. I would have fit in the emo category for a few years of my life, just saying. Probably more on the screamo side, but I don't know. So depending on where you put me back in those years. But we want to talk about the fact that God has emotions. And sometimes, I don't know about you, but I oftentimes live my life, and feeling is everything. Feeling is like our currency. If I'm not feeling it, it's really hard to get motivated to do something. If you're not feeling it with your homework, think about how much more difficult it is for you to get through your homework when you're not in the mood or the mindset. When you're not feeling like doing something with your friends and everyone else is doing it, think of how much harder it is to do that thing when you're not feeling it. When you don't feel good or you don't feel loved, it changes how you act or behave. If you're feeling sad or you're feeling depressed, it affects everything and the grid by which you receive all your information. If you're feeling lonely or you're feeling depressed, even positive information gets put in this weird category of sadness. You guys know what I'm talking about? Like, if you've ever felt like you're worthless and someone gives you a compliment, well, you're feeling like you're worthless. So you take this compliment, which is supposed to build you up, but instead you find a way to make it tear you down. Do you know what I'm talking about? Does anyone ever do that? I'm guilty of that. I'm so guilty of that. People are like, hey man, I'm really encouraged by what you said, or blah, 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 in the back of my mind. And it's all silent. Sometimes I'll say a little bit of it, and silently I'm just like, no, that can't be, that doesn't fit. I don't belong there, or whatever. And so then I find a way to actually make me feel worse about myself. Here's a person trying to make me feel good, and I just walked away feeling more terrible. You guys know what I'm talking about? Have you guys ever tried to cheer someone else up, and they just left in tears? Hey, you look great today. Why'd you say that? Ah! No. I'm terribly, I immediately regret just doing that. But here's the thing, is that God is the God of emotions. God made us in his image, and he wants us to have emotions. If you don't have emotions, you're a sociopath. Just think about it. Emotions are something that's part of the human condition. We need emotions. It's part of how God made us. It's what makes us feel alive. It's what makes everything sort of have meaning and depth. Life without appropriate anger would feel kind of flat. Life without appropriate happiness or appropriate sadness would just feel flat. Life without emotions is flat. But God has given you this huge array of emotions to feel and express and enjoy life. But the problem is, a lot of times outside of the context of God, our emotions become God. And we live for emotions. So if I'm not feeling it in my walk with God, or I'm not feeling close to God, I make that my reality, and it changes how I live with him. Rather than feeling like I'm something or whatever, it changes how I relate to my friends. If I'm feeling angry or I'm feeling hurt, I'm going to react on those feelings towards someone else. Does that make sense? It shapes how you live. And so a lot of times our emotions become the God that controls us. Rather than going to the God who made us, who actually has those emotions, and figuring out what this is all about. Because the reality is your emotions are kind of like a compass. They're a gauge. They're kind of like a dashboard on the car. You know, all those little lights and stuff in the car. If you guys are driving, you know what I'm talking about. You turn it on and you get the oil light, and you got the battery light, and you got your speedometer. Your emotions are kind of gauges for how you're doing in life, how you're feeling in life, how things are going. And those can give insight into like what's really happening in ways that words never could. So emotions are a good thing. And so what we want to do is go back to God with those emotions and get to know him who made us with those emotions. Am I getting redundant? You guys tracking with me? Okay, I feel like I'm trying to trip over myself. But the last thing I want to say is sometimes, if I'm honest, I feel like I've got to get in the right place to talk to God. I've got to get in the right place to get back to church. I got to get in the right place to get back in the Word. I kind of say, as long as I'm feeling it, I'll get back to God. And what I'm really saying is that God is kind of like a distant robot. Sorry, I'm not even going to go there. A terrible robot anyway. But that God is like some kind of distant, calculated robot. I'm feeling all these things, but I don't know how to relate to God because he doesn't understand how I feel. But the cool thing is, and I really hope that you do more of this as you grow in your walk, is that you read the Bible and you realize that God is full of emotions. He's full of anger. He's full of love. He's full of he even says hate in the Bible. He's full of sorrow. He's full of joy. He's full of happiness. And in the right context, these things are beautiful and they're redemptive and they lead to really good things. But in the wrong context, in the human context, sometimes they can lead us to things that cause regret and more pain. So tonight, we're talking about our first one, right? This is trying to be exciting. Our first one, woo, yeah, okay. So the first one is this, and then we'll talk about the topic of anger. So some questions. I think Kevin's got them on the screen for you. The first question I want you to talk about amongst yourself is this. We're going to talk about the topic of anger. But first, why is anger, what is it about anger that is so powerful? Because we've seen people do crazy things in anger. So what is it about anger that is such a powerful emotion for us? Just wait, real fast. Just by show of hands, how many of you guys have ever been angry before? Just hold them up. All right, look around the room. If you don't have your hands up, you're lying. Really, maybe you're not. Maybe you've never been angry, which is cool. But a lot of us have been angry. So we're all in the same boat here. So what is it about anger that is so powerful? Talk to your person next to you, or behind you, or whatever. Okay, about one more second on that. One more second. Don't take too long. But what are some things about anger that makes it so powerful? Think about the crazy things people do on anger. Okay, hold that thought. Now turn to somebody behind you, or the seat in the row be in front or behind you. Somebody you didn't talk to next to you, but either in front or behind you. Turn around, say, hey, what's up? If you're looking at someone's back, then look at someone else's. But all right, so then what is it? That's the next thing. Next question is this. Next slide, Kevin. What are some regrets that anger can cause? So like people do things in anger. Like what are some regrets or pain that anger can cause? All right, think of it. Get all Dr. Phil on us tonight. Dr. Phil says what you need to do. All right, pull it in. So hold those ideas in your mind and your thoughts. We're just going to kind of keep rolling. We'll get you to C groups pretty soon here. But the first truth, I'm going to give you some truths about anger here. Because anger, the reality is a powerful emotion, and it's one of those emotions that causes a lot of regrets in a lot of us. If I were to tell you my story, I'm someone who struggles and who's struggled with anger. I've struggled with a temper before. I've struggled with rage before. I've done some crazy, ridiculous things on the road because I was angry, like risking the lives of my friends in the car and the other people on the road around me because I was angry. Like, I just get crazy and blinded by anger sometimes, and some of us could be there. Now, God has done a great work in my life, and I celebrate His grace and the fact that I feel like things have changed and I'm not that person anymore. But there's this underlying current in us, and when it taps into anger, like just sometimes a beast rises out of us. You know what I'm talking about? Sometimes when we're angry, we say things that we regret. We say things that hurt other people, and it's just in our anger. In the moment, it felt so good. We knew just how to say it, and we cut them right to the core. And every moment of us in that loved it. But then when the anger goes away, it's almost like we get over that hangover. It's like we get drunk on anger, and all of a sudden the anger like leaves us, and we like wake up and we're like, I can't believe I said that. Or we've been on the receiving side of that. We've got people that have been angry with us, and it's like they become a different person. How many of you guys know somebody that just feels like they become a different person when they're angry? Yeah, anger can just really, it can just get a hold of us. It can shape us and change us. So tonight, I want us to get a little bit of a handle on what anger looks like. And I don't want this to be an anger management thing. Ultimately, I want us to get to know the God that made us with the emotion of anger and how we could use that in the right way. But the first truth I want you to know about anger is that it's powerful. It causes us to, it changes our body, it changes our temperature, it changes our heart rate. It can physiologically affect us. It affects our minds. We get tense. We actually can get like adrenaline pumping, so we get extra strength out of anger sometimes. It's incredibly powerful, and sometimes it just takes over us. Kind of like this kid. Kevin, you want to play this here? This is, you can just, it speaks for itself. And I apologize, I was going to edit this, and I just didn't get a chance, so just enjoy the whole thing. Now, he's got a few more posts of his rage out there, and I feel like it's become a bit of a shtick for him, and he's got, like, don't worry, he's got tons of hits, and he's probably making money off the video. So I figured I'd just show it. But anger can cause us to just do crazy things. I hate my life! But anger can cause us to lose perspective. It's just one of those things that can blind us. And this is the second thing I talk about, is that anger can blind us from reality. When we're angry, we just don't see consequences clearly. We don't see what our actions can actually do. We just kind of just get caught up in anger, and we just start doing it, and we just don't care where it lands. I'll tell you a quick story. Some of you heard me share this. I had the permission to share it again. But this is a few years ago. I was coming home with my kids late at night. We went to Target, because you buy stuff at Target, because there's good stuff at Target, yay Target. And then I get all those deliciously awesome good things from Target. Delicious? Well, they sell food, so I'm sure it was delicious. So we get all this stuff. We actually did have groceries, but it's late and it's raining. Now we get into our neighborhood, and this is in Chicago Heights, and we get in our neighborhood, and there is a party. Now our street is kind of narrow. It's kind of a narrow street, and so when you park cars on one side of the street or the other side of the street, there's not a whole lot of room but for one car. So I'm barely getting my car through there, and I go about maybe a half a block, and someone pulls out of the driveway of this party, and hey, I'm all in favor of having fun and pulling stuff out, but they pull out and they look at me like, dude, you're just gonna have to get out of the way. I'm backing up, and it's my time to go now. Listen, I am on the road. I technically have the right of way. You're leaving a driveway, but I have my kids, and I'm gonna be sensible because I'm an adult. So, okay, it's fine. I'll try to back up. Okay, I can't back up. And so what do? I put my car in reverse, and I go a whole block backwards between cars on either side of me, and I let this person through. Now I'm already in a bad mood now because it's happening. It's raining. It's late. We're supposed to be home earlier, and the kids just get meltdown crazy when it's late. They turn into those kind of beasts sometimes. Go to bed. You'll be fine tomorrow. But yeah, anyways, we going home, and I start to get there, and all of a sudden I pull in our driveway with our car. We're unpacking our kids, and I get out Sophia, and she's kind of like walking and stumbling. She was a little bit younger at this time. And all of a sudden, at the end of my block, and it's probably about where, if you guys look behind me, see where the cars are in the parking lot? See where the white car is? Anyways, a little bit further than that. That's about how long the block was. I hear like two cars drag racing on my street. Now remember, our street isn't very wide, so they're taking up both oncoming and going side, whatever that is called, traffic. I went to driver's ed, I promise. And they're both coming down the sides of the street, so they're taking up the whole street. Tires are squealing, it is rainy, it's dark, and my daughter is at the curb. Now here's the curb, right? So here's the curb. On the other side of this is death for her. My daughter is just sort of tumbling like, oh, shiny cars, what's going on? Oh. So as a dad, I flip out, right? And I throw the groceries in the air. I run and I grab her and I take her like this. And then I had the dad moment. I looked at the cars and I am just now Papa Bear. Like you mess with my children. And I get in front of them and I jump in front of the cars, right? They have to slam on their brakes. And I'm like, at this point, I'm like furious, but I'm like, I'm still gonna be the adult. I'm going to be the adult. I'm going to talk to them. And I go up there, and I'm like, hey, listen, because we actually had an accident that took the lives of a few people in our neighborhood when I was a kid. And I was like, I'm just going to tell them, just chill out. Like, I know you guys are having fun, but like, there's kids. Just be careful, okay? I'm not even going to give them like the whole riot act lecture. So I'm just like, slow down, and I come around the side, and I just like, hey, put down your window. Punch the window, and I'm like, you get out of the car now! Out of the car! And they slam on the brakes, and also my little daughter's like, my dad's a monster! And I'm like, oh my gosh, get back here, I'm so sorry. And then Michelle's like, you're out of control. And I'm like, give me the keys. I'm going after them. It's like, I'm fine, I'm gonna run after them. And so I ran after them. I go running. They're in the car, and I'm running after them, and I'm mad. So I'm like chasing after them. Well, this is just stupid because like right in front of my house is my address. I just made a bunch of students mad. And how do we handle things when we're students and we're mad? We teepee, we egg, we fork, we do whatever. So I'm like, oh great, now I'm just a sitting duck. And so they just came around the drive, they drove around a couple times to see if I was like not in front of my house, and then they drove off. So I'm like on constant watch. 2 weeks later, sorry, I'm just dragging the story on. You guys okay with this? Okay, so 2 weeks later, I come in my neighborhood, and I come home from dropping my cousin off from the airport. He just flew in from California. I'm spitting a lot. That's what happens when you're mad, you spit. So he comes back from California, super excited to have him here. I dropped him off with my parents who live down that way, and it's like 2:33 in the morning. I get into my neighborhood, and there it is. There's a car with the parking lights on. It's a minivan, and it's like 5 doors down, like maybe a little further than this brick wall from where I'm standing. I hear the little and I get out of my car, I'm like, it's almost 3 in the morning. What's someone doing out in front of my house? I'm just going to wait here. And so I shut the door, and I went up, and I kind of just sat in the back of my thing. I think these are the guys. And all of a sudden, the car slowly starts creeping towards my house. And I see all these little cell phone lights, these little teeny cell phone lights come on, and they turn on. I'm like, oh my gosh, they're going to film this? Are they texting their friends? Is this going to go down? Am I about to fight? Like, what's going to happen? My adrenaline is pumping. I just want to do this. And all of a sudden, they sit there, and you just honked your horn for about 15 seconds in the middle of the night and you drove off? Really? You had nothing else better to do than get in your mom's minivan and come over here to me who owns a house and a car and fight me? Really? Okay, that's it. So anyways, I sit there, I'm like, no, this is it. So they start coming around a couple times, they come around a couple more times, they keep doing this. They drive by, they honk the car, and then they drive by. This is half an hour. My neighbor's lights are turning on, they're looking out the window. They're like in their nightgown and slippers because I have like old neighbors. They're like, what's going on? I'm like, I don't know, go to bed. So this goes on for about 30 minutes, and finally I'm just like, I had it. I'm just getting more and more angry and like angry. So this is that blinding anger I'm talking about. There's a point to this. And so no joke, we had a tree that fell down in our front yard like a week or two before, and I just haven't had a chance to get us like a whatever it is to cut it up because I don't have a chainsaw. I don't own chainsaws. So I'm like, how am I going to break this thing up? And this is a big old heavy thing. And this is an exaggeration of how thick it is, but it was about half the thickness of this. So about the thickness of like a parking meter, a little thicker than a parking meter. So I go to my backyard, and I'm just going up from mom's minivan, and I drag right across the whole middle of the street. They were driving with their headlights off. So I'm like, they're not going to see it. Let's do this. Go ahead. And so I just sit there and wait. Sure enough, 5-6 minutes later, they come around again. And they squeal the tires about, 3 or 4 houses down with their horn honking. Boom! 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 And And they fly. I know you guys are like really side of the lines, but they flip around and they almost go off the road. The branches are flying everywhere. It is crazy. It's out of control. And I'm like, finally. And all of a sudden, the tires squeal, and they're like, you see like cell phones flying, and people are not in their seatbelts. And I see them kind of crawl out of their huddled up mess from what happened from that hit. And they stop, and the car kind of backs up to get to the side of the road. I'm like, finally, get out of the car. Let's do this. If we're going to fight, I don't care. I'm like, I don't care. I'll go to jail. I'm like, I'm willing to do anything for this because I'm so angry. I'm not thinking any kind of consequences. I seriously would have been some serious total doo-doo. Like, I just messed up a car, right? I'm not thinking insurance claims. I'm not thinking, what if they went off the road and they hit somebody else? What if they hurt somebody? I'm just angry. This is not the way to live, guys, but this is not modeling good behavior. And sure enough, a couple seconds later, they open the door, and my neighbor, by the way, is this huge cop. This big old cop. His name's Dave, and he moonlights at a strip club in Chicago Heights. And so at night, to make extra income, he's a bouncer. And so he walks out, he's like, Mike, you know what the hell's going on here? Like, and he's using another foul language. And I'm like, he's got this like higher pitched voice, but he's just huge. He's like, I don't know. I'm like, dude, Dave, I have no idea. So he starts to go back in, and a couple seconds later, I hear, Dave, I'm so sorry. I think we hit a squirrel or a dog. And out come 4 strippers in that van. What? Okay, so all this time I thought these kids were like coming to get me, and they were just like people that were giving Dave a hard time for not being there on his shift that night. So, rewind a little bit here. Imagine the headlines. Just imagine the headlines. Pastor damages car injuring 4 strippers from Chicago Heights. That's just not going to look good, right? It's terrible. But when we're angry, think about it. How often are you really thinking through what's going to happen? You know, I put my family in jeopardy. I put my job in jeopardy. I put my insurance in jeopardy. I put my finances in jeopardy. All this stuff, because at that point in time, all I cared about was my anger and making sure that someone else got the other side of my anger. How many of us have been in that situation where we just get so angry that all we care about is making sure that the other person feels what we're feeling? Anger blinds us from the consequences. Anger is powerful, and anger blinds us. And according to James 1:20, this is in the Bible, you can put this up there, Kevin, is that our anger will not lead to good places. Our own anger, human anger, will not take us to where God intended to be. It says this, for the anger of man does not produce the righteousness of God. When we're angry, and if we're followers of Jesus, we got to be aware that anger, if we're not properly putting it in check, is not going to lead about to the kind of things that God wants. No matter how good it feels, no matter how right it feels in that moment, when we act on that anger in our blindness and in that power, it is not going to bring about the good things that God intended. The next thing is this, is that anger reveals what we care about. Because the bottom line is that anger is really a secondary emotion. Anger is never the first emotion. Anger is always a symptom that what you want to have happened didn't happen. Anger is always a symptom that your will was blocked. Something that you wanted to do, you couldn't do. Something that you thought you had, you didn't. Something that you wanted to have got taken away from you. It's a loss of control, it's a sadness, but anger is always a secondary emotion. And so before we let anger drive us, we need to ask ourselves, what's that primary emotion that we have? What is it that we really care about that's going on here that's causing us to be angry? Anger is always going to be a secondary emotion, so just stop. If you can, just stop in your anger. What is it that I'm really mad about here? What is it about this situation that really bothers me? And think about that. The next thing is this, is that anger in itself is not a sin. I think sometimes I get angry about stuff, or I'm frustrated about stuff. And I don't know if you've done this before, and I think I've shared this story before, or at least this analogy, but we get so angry, like, I'm so mad, I'm just gonna, like that guy, someone says, hey, Mike, you should pray. Fine, I'm gonna pray. Heavenly Father, I'm very angry right now. I'm very upset, and I want to, like sometimes we come to God as though like all of a sudden I have to turn my anger off in order to talk to God. I need to turn off how I'm feeling and talk to God as though like the anger that I have is a sin. Anger in and of itself, even though that it takes us sometimes in very bad directions, is not necessarily a bad emotion. And the next truth about anger is this, is that God gets angry. God gets angry. Now hear me really carefully when I say this, that God is not angry. God himself is not angry. But God gets angry. That's a big important distinction, because sometimes we feel like God is just always angry, waiting to just get us at every turn. God is angry. No, God gets angry. But that's important to know for us, because you can make God angry. And we don't like to talk about that a lot because sometimes we like to have a God that's always going to be a teddy bear. It's always going to love us, always going to nurture us. But God gets angry when we disobey. God gets angry when we settle for less. God gets angry when we hurt other people. God gets angry when we sin. God gets angry when we fall into things that hurt us. God gets angry at the sin and the brokenness in this world. And sometimes we talk about other people, it's like, don't judge. I don't want to have a God that judges. I don't want a God that gets angry. But what's more concerning for us than this? A God that can look at the world and the pain and the hurt that's in it and not care? Or a God that can look at it and get angry? God gets angry. God feels emotions. And I want to invite you to read the scriptures, Old Testament in particular. You will see God get sassy. You'll see God get an attitude. You'll see God get really cutting to his people because he feels things. He deals with the people all the time that are constantly backing out on him, constantly not following through on their plans for him, constantly lying and deceiving or hiding or turning to other gods or loving other things more than him. So God gets angry. But the beautiful thing, and I meant to put this passage up there, is that the Bible tells us that God is gracious and he's compassionate and he's slow to anger. God doesn't get angry easily and God doesn't get angry quickly and God is patient with us, but God gets angry. And that is in some ways a really beautiful thing because God can relate to you when you're angry. When you get mad about someone giving you a bad name, they gave the Son of Man a bad name. When you get mad about someone lying or spreading gossip about you, people gossiped and spread bad things about who God is all the time. And God gets mad about it. People take God's name and do terrible things with it. God gets mad about it. So if you've ever been hurt or your name's been ever dragged through the mud or you're caught up in drama and you feel other people are talking about you and it's out of your control and you're angry, God can relate to you. And you can relate to him in your anger. God gets angry about the injustice and the pain in the world. You see people getting bullied, people getting hurt. You see the injustice in the world, and it makes you mad. The truth is that God gets mad about those same things. So before we jump off the bandwagon of our faith while we're mad, when we're angry, it's the best and one of the perfect times for us to turn our hearts to God. And so I want to share this passage about what Jesus does with his anger. There's so many more we can do, but I just wanted to pick this one because that's one of my favorites. You guys ready for this? You guys tracking so far? I got a lot quieter. I'm sorry. I just realized I was probably hurting people's ears, and hopefully Kevin put me down a little bit in there. And yeah, anyways. But this comes out of Mark chapter 3. So if you have your Bibles with you and you want to open it up and read it out of your own, you're welcome to. Mark chapter 3. Another time Jesus went to the synagogue, and a man with a shriveled hand was there. Some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. Now, some of you already know this, but the Sabbath was a holy day. It was a day of rest, and for the Jewish people, it was a day that you weren't supposed to work. Because God said, hey, I don't want you to be defined by your work. I don't want you to be defined by your labor. I don't want you to be defined by what you do. It's crazy to think today that people would define themselves by what they do. It's weird. I know. The Bible's so irrelevant. Okay, that was supposed to be funny, but facetious, thank you. But yeah, so God said, I don't want you to be defined by these things. I want you to rest and enjoy the creation and enjoy me on the Sabbath. And so it was a law not to work. But the Jewish people had this way of creating a system of laws and a system of bigger laws on top of laws and on top of laws and on top of laws to make sure that they didn't make a mistake or break one of God's laws. And so it became this system of really heavy, burdensome rules about following God. And sometimes they missed it all entirely. And so it's a Sabbath, and there's these people who want to be able to arrest Jesus. And if Jesus breaks in a religious law, then they can arrest him because they had the authority to do that. And then no more Jesus. Or Jesus is behind bars, and he could stop teaching. So these are people that wanted to get Jesus out of the way because he's getting popularity. So some of them were looking for a reason to accuse Jesus, so they watched him closely to see if he would heal him on the Sabbath. And Jesus said to the man with a shriveled hand, stand up in front of everybody. I just love this. Imagine Jesus walking into a crowd, and he sees the man on the ground, and he says, listen, I want you to stand up in front of everybody because I want what's going to happen to you to be plain as day to everybody else around me. Stand up. And then Jesus asked them, and he's looking at the men around him, he says, which is lawful on the Sabbath, to do good or to do evil? Was this whole law that God gave you to rest on the Sabbath there so that you could do good or to do evil? Is it good to save a life or to kill a life? But they remained silent because they knew the answer. They knew the right thing to do. And he looked around them, and look at this verse right here, verse 5. He looked around at them in anger. Jesus gets angry. He looks at this man who needed help, And there was the religious community around him that maybe could have helped him, maybe didn't. And they knew that Jesus was going to go and heal this man. And he was aware of the fact that they were going to use this opportunity to get him in trouble. And he looked at him and he's mad. And he was angry. God gets angry then when he wants something to happen and it doesn't happen. God gets angry when people that are hurt don't get cared for or find excuses to be looked aside and dragged aside or whatever. God gets angry. Jesus gets angry. And so he looked at them and he says he was deeply distressed. I think I've grieved there. Grieved in their stubborn hearts. So not only is Jesus angry at them, but he's just sad. He's like, you of all people need to know better. You of all people have the answer. And like for me as a dad, for my kids, like sometimes it's like this weird kind of thing. Like when my son does something or my daughter does something that's just wrong and bad, part of me is like mad because I'm like, why did you do it? And then part of me is sad because I'm like, you should know better. This isn't how we raised you. And we as people of the church, people who follow God, people who read the book, who want to follow Jesus, like when we don't do the right thing, I feel like there's the same thing where God's like, really, he has higher expectations for us. But it's a loving and it's a grieving kind of anger. And he looks around to them and he says to him, stretch out your hand. And he stretched it out, and his hand was completely restored. And then the Pharisees went out and began to plot with the Herodians how they might kill Jesus. So they sought, they had proof, and this set Jesus on a course that was one day going to lead him to the cross. But Jesus would rather take a road towards redemption in the cross than to pass up this opportunity to do the good thing. But the thing I want us to walk away from is that Jesus was angry. And we have a God that's not afraid of our anger. We can come to him with our anger. And the last truth is this, is that anger is always going to lead somewhere. Your anger never stays still. Anger never stays still. You're either going to stuff it, you're going to stuff it inside, and you're going to just bury it, and then you're going to hurt yourself, or you're going to lash it out on somebody else, or you're going to do something. But that anger is always going to go in some direction. When we feel angry, we have to do something with it. And that story with Jesus is the one I wanted to share with us, because what Jesus does with his anger is something beautiful. Jesus takes his anger and he uses it to heal. All that energy, all that rage, all that stuff that we feel with anger, what would happen? What would it look like if we could turn it over to God in such a way that that anger, rather than tearing things down and hurting other people, was actually turned into using it for good things? But there's two different things that are going to have to happen. One is that Jesus did something about his anger, and God did something about his anger for us, and he took it to the cross. And he forgave us. And for some of us, there's things where our anger just can't go out. We're angry at people in our lives that we have no control over. We're angry at people for how they've treated us, and there's nothing we can do about their attitudes towards us. We can't change their minds. There are certain people in your life that you're trying to please that you'll never change or never fix. Nothing you can do about them. There's nothing you can do about it. And yet we hold this anger inside of us, hoping that somehow our anger and harboring that anger is going to fix them one day. Or by lashing out on them in response is somehow going to make them stop. But sometimes we need to remember that some anger just needs to move towards forgiveness. And so if you're having a hard time with that anger, you need to help take that to the cross where Jesus took it for them and forgave them. That's a really hard word, and we're going to talk more forgiveness later on this year. But one of the places our anger needs to go is by recognizing that sometimes it just has to be dealt with at the cross. But then there's other things that your anger has that you can do direct and immediate things for. There's things that make you mad. You could do something about it. So rather than harboring it or stuffing it or doing something bad about it, use that energy, take it to God and say, I'm mad. What can I do? What do you want me to do about this situation? And see where he takes you. There's a passage you're going to read in your C groups, but it says this. It says, therefore each of you must put off falsehood, speak truthfully to your neighbor, for we are all members of one body. And in your anger, do not sin, and do not let the sun go down on you while you are still angry, and do not give the devil a foothold. In your anger, do not sin. It doesn't say don't be angry, but it says in your anger, do not sin. It's always going to lead you somewhere. Take it to a place where God can use it. So in our closing, I'm just going to ask you a few questions, and I want you to think about it. But what makes you mad? Who are some people that you're angry with right now in your life? Who are some people that you feel hurt by and you just want them to feel your wrath? some of us have real things to get mad about, and I'm not trying to minimize it at all. I mean, you have legit things to be mad about. Now, is God asking you to take the thing you're mad about to the cross? Or is he asking you to take that thing you're mad about and put something into action? Don't lash out at it. Don't stuff it. Another thing I want to encourage you is don't hit send on your email or your text. That's another thing that can cause a lot of pain. Just type it out and then delete it and just wait, because sometimes so much more insightful stuff comes up and it's like you build a pimple that's just going to pop and burst. Gross. But that's a lot of times what we do is we just feed it and we feed it and we feed it until finally it explodes. So just don't hit send. Don't do it on Facebook. Don't rant about that person that knows you're talking about Facebook and then everyone else can sit and hit like on your Facebook status. Don't build an army so that other people are on your side so that you've got more people against them and your people crush their people. That's not how God handled it. God handled it with forgiveness, humility, and the cross. But some things you can do is pray when you're angry. When you're angry, go to God in prayer. Don't wait until you're done being angry. Talk to him right then and there. And then the last thing is watch out for angry people. If you're angry or someone else is angry, watch out for angry people. I don't think I got this one up there, Kevin, but I love this proverb, and it's so good. It's like, pressing milk produces curds, pressing the nose produces blood, and pressing anger produces strife. Let me say that again. Pressing milk produces curds. Have you guys ever made milk curds or cheese? When you press the milk, you condense it down into like curds or cheese. When you press a nose, you produce blood. And when you press anger, pressing anger produces strife. When you push the buttons of other people or you let people push your buttons, strife and bad things happen. Avoid those opportunities as much as possible. That's Proverbs 30:33. That's a great one. Proverbs 30:33. So let me pray for us. I'm going to send you to your C groups. But in the meantime, don't hurt strippers and don't kill the president. What did you guys talk about, Rev, tonight? Well, we saw the president get killed by a plunger. And we talked about how Mike almost killed strippers with a log or something. But what I want you to remember is that God took care of his anger at the cross. Okay? Remember that. Remember that. So we could take our anger to him, to the cross, or let that anger that God's given you do something for life and for good things like Jesus did in healing the man. Let's pray. God, thank you for emotions. Thank you that you get angry. Thank you that you don't just are distant and far away or don't understand us in our anger, but you do. You understand us when we're hurt and when we're angry. God, we want to live in a way that makes you happy. We don't want to make you angry as people. And at the same time, God, we want our anger to be used in a way that glorifies you rather than destroy or tear things down. So we ask that you would bless this night and the rest of our days here, and that you help us in our anger in a way that blesses others rather than tears people down. In Jesus' name, all God's people said, amen. Have a great week.